I'll be going is quite challenging, steep grades, loose rocks. We wouldn't want you getting injured when Adrian needs you to be strong. Something about the way he steered her away from his search area made Marissa pause, but Coach Rodriguez was already nodding in agreement. He's right, Team A will cover the northern section. That's where the old logging roads are easier terrain. As the teams formed up and prepared to depart, Marissa watched Mr. Chandler efficiently organize his team, distributing supplies and giving what sounded like a practice safety briefing for a high school science teacher. He seemed remarkably prepared for this exact scenario, as if he'd been planning for it. We'll find her, Mrs. Ewing, he said as he passed her on the way out, his hand briefly touching her shoulder. I promise you, we'll search every inch of that forest. Adrian deserves to come home. Before the search teams departed, there was a lull as volunteers gathered their gear and finalized transportation arrangements. Marissa found herself at the kitchen table with Mr. Chandler and a few other teachers reviewing the search grid one more time. The science teacher had pulled his chair close to hers, pointing out various landmarks on his detailed map. You know, Mrs. Ewing, Mr. Chandler said, his voice taking on a confiding tone, I've been thinking about all my conversations with Adrian over the past year. There might be places she mentioned that could help narrow our search. What kind of conversations? Marissa asked, grateful for any potential leads while she often talked about her college goals. During our sessions, she was deeply anxious about getting into a good pre-med program. He leaned back, his expression thoughtful. She specifically mentioned her fear of disappointing you, especially after your husband left 3 years ago. She felt like she had to be perfect to make up for all the upheaval. Marissa's breath caught. The divorce had been finalized 3 years ago, yes, but Adrienne had been so stoic about it. She'd never expressed those feelings to Marissa directly. She told you about that? Oh yes, we talked quite extensively. Her perfectionism was really weighing on her. She'd say things like, Mom's been through so much, I can't let her down. And what if I'm not smart enough for medical school? She was putting tremendous pressure on herself. Mrs. Patterson, the English teacher, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. I didn't realize Adrienne was struggling that much. She always seemed so confident in class. She opened up during our tutoring sessions, Mr. Chandler explained. One-on-one environments tend to make students more comfortable sharing their concerns. I'm so grateful for those tutoring sessions, Marissa said, touching his arm briefly. Her biology grades improved so much from B's to A's. Those Monday and Wednesday sessions really made a difference. Mr. Chandler's expression flickered for just a moment before he smiled. Actually, we met on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I remember specifically because those were my designated tutoring days. Marissa frowned. No, I'm certain it was Mondays and Wednesdays. Those were my late shifts at the hospital. I remember because I'd leave dinner in the fridge for her. On those nights, memory can be tricky during stressful times, Mr. Chandler said smoothly, but I'm quite certain it was Tuesdays and Thursdays. In fact, Adrienne preferred studying in the science prep room rather than the library, because it was quieter, more private for concentrated learning. The PREP room, Coach Rodriguez interjected, isn't that usually off limits to students? I made an exception for dedicated students like Adrienne. She'd actually helped me organize supplies while we reviewed material. Kinesthetic learning, you know, it helped her retain information better. Mr. Chandler's voice took on an almost nostalgic quality. She earned quite a bit of extra credit by staying after school to help prepare lab experiments. Such a dedicated young woman. Marissa felt a strange unease creeping up her spine. The way he spoke about these private sessions, the detailed knowledge of her daughter's inner thoughts, it seemed beyond what a typical teacher-student relationship would involve. How often did these prep room sessions happen? She asked carefully. Oh, quite regularly. Sometimes she'd stay until 500 or 600 in the evening, especially when we were preparing for big exams. She was determined to maintain her A average. He smiled, but there was something in his eyes that made Marissa's skin prickle. I told her that with her natural intelligence and my guidance, she could achieve anything she set her mind to. Mr. Chandler's phone, face up on the table, suddenly buzzed with an incoming text. Before he could grab it, Marissa caught a glimpse of the preview notification. Stick to the plan. He quickly flipped the phone over his movement, just a bit too swift, too nervous. Probably other teachers checking in about the search, he said, but his voice had taken on a slightly higher pitch. Aren't you going to answer it? Mrs. Patterson asked. Could be important for the search coordination. No, I'm sure it's nothing urgent. We should focus on the task at hand. He turned back to the map, but Marissa noticed his hands were no longer quite steady as he pointed to various sectors. The unease in Marissa's stomach was growing stronger. The personal details he knew, the confusion about the tutoring schedule, the private sessions in restricted areas, and now this cryptic text message. Individually, they might mean nothing, but together they painted a picture that made her deeply uncomfortable. Mr. Chandler, she said slowly, did Adrian ever mention any specific places in the forest where she liked to hike, any trails she particularly enjoyed? His eyes met hers, and for just a moment she saw something flicker in them. Calculation, fear. No, she wasn't much of an outdoors person, preferred her books to hiking boots. That's why this whole disappearance is so puzzling. It wasn't like her to go off trail, but Marissa knew that was a lie. Adrian loved hiking, had been on the trail team sophomore year either. Mr. Chandler didn't know her daughter as well as he claimed, or he was deliberately being deceptive. Neither option sat well with her. The commotion in her driveway grew louder as search teams loaded equipment into vehicles through the living room window. Marissa could see Mr. Chandler directing his team with practiced efficiency, distributing walkie-talkies and checking backpacks. Something about the conversation at the kitchen table gnawed at her, those inconsistencies about the tutoring schedule, the unsettling familiarity with which he spoke about her daughter's inner thoughts. Unable to shake her growing disc, Marissa slipped away from the crowd and climbed the stairs to Adrian's room. She'd left it largely untouched since the disappearance. A shrine to her missing daughter, the bed was still made with the purple comforter Adrienne had picked out for her 16th birthday. Her desk sat exactly as she'd left it, that July morning. Laptop, closed pencil cup, full textbook stacked neatly on the shelf above. Marissa pulled open the desk drawer where Adrienne kept her academic planner. Her daughter had always been meticulous about scheduling, a trait inherited from her father. The planner was a thick, spiral-bound book with monthly and weekly views, its pages filled with Adrian's neat handwriting in various colored pens. Flipping back to the previous school year, Marissa found September and began searching for any mention of tutoring sessions there in the second week of September. Written in blue ink, Science Help, MRC 330, room 214, but it was on a Monday, not Tuesday or Thursday, as Mr. Chandler had insisted. Her fingers trembled as she continued through the pages. Another entry 2 weeks later, again on a Monday, then a Wednesday session. In early October, with a note cancelled, Mr. C has meeting rescheduled to Friday. The pattern that emerged was nothing like the regular Tuesday-Thursday schedule. He described that the sessions were scattered, sporadic, and frequently rescheduled at his request. Marissa found Adriana's progress report cards tucked into the planner's pockets. In September, her biology grade was a solid B. By October, when these after-school sessions became more frequent, according to the planner, it had jumped to an A. By November, perfect scores across the board. She turned back to the October weekly pages, reading more carefully. Now, in the margins, Adrienne had made little notes in purple pen, her favorite color for personal thoughts. October 15th, Mr. C says, I'm special, different from other students. October 22nd, earned my Today Mr. C, so proud, the language made Marissa's stomach turn. And what did that mean? Moving into November, she found more concerning entries. Several lunch periods were marked with science prep room, organizing supplies, but with time notations that didn't make sense. 12 to 1245. When Lakeland High's lunch period was only 30 minutes long, another entry showed 12 to 1250, with a note late to English, but Mr. C wrote me a passer. Hands were shaking now as she reached November 8th. There, in Adrian's careful script, was an entry that made her blood run cold. Mr. C gave me the pink bracelet for being his best student today. So pretty, he said, not to show Mum because other kids would be jealous and might say mean things. Our special secret, a bracelet. Marissa had never seen any pink bracelet. She frantically flipped through more pages, finding scattered references to gifts and privileges that seemed inappropriate. December 3rd, Mr. C let me use his personal laptop for research during lunch. He trusts me so much. December 10th, found our secret study spot today. Mr. C says it's just for his special students. Had to promise not to tell anyone, not even Jess. Jess was Adrian's best friend. They told each other everything, or at least Marissa had thought they did. The December 15th entry was longer, taking up the entire note section for that day. Mr. C explained why our tutoring is different from what other kids get. He says, I have potential that needs special nurturing away from the mediocre masses. His words, the secret study spot is perfect. No interruptions, no jealous kids watching. He says, by senior year, I'll be so far ahead of everyone else that getting into UW will be easy. Mum will be so proud. Just have to keep our methods private. Mr. C says people wouldn't understand how special our connection is. Marissa's legs gave out and she sank onto Adrian's bed, the planner clutched in her trembling hands. The language, the secrecy, the gifts, the isolated meetings, it all painted a picture of grooming that made her physically ill. How had she missed this? How had the school missed this? Through the window she could hear car doors slamming as the search teams prepared to leave. Mr. Chandler's voice carried up from the driveway, authoritative and confident as he gave last-minute instructions to his team. The same voice that had whispered to her daughter about being special, that had lured her into secret meetings with gifts and promises. Marissa's mind raced. Should she call Detective Holbrook? But what if she was wrong? What if she was just a paranoid mother reading too much into innocent teacher-student interactions? The entries were concerning, but not explicitly criminal. And if she was right, if Mr. Chandler had been grooming Adrian, what did that mean for her disappearance? The sound of engines starting below made her decision urgent. The search teams were about to leave, including Mr. Chandler's team, heading to the eastern quadrant, the area he'd specifically steered her away from. Marissa tucked the planner into her jacket and hurried downstairs. Her mind made up. The search teams were loading into their vehicles, volunteers checking equipment and confirming radio frequencies. She spotted her assigned team gathering near Coach Rodriguez's SUV, but her eyes were fixed in Mr. Chandler as he walked toward his silver Honda Accord. Mrs. Ewing were about ready to head out, called Mrs. Patterson from Team A. I'll be right there, Marissa replied, moving toward her own car instead. Just need to grab something from my vehicle. She slipped into her Toyota Camry and started the engine, watching through her rearview mirror as Mr. Chandler's Honda pulled out of her driveway. Team C was supposed to head northeast toward the Forester Ward Bunker Road where Buddy had been found. But as Marissa eased onto the street, maintaining a careful distance, she watched Mr. Chandler turn south onto Highway 95, the complete opposite direction. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel. Where was he going? She followed at a distance, keeping at least 2 cars between them when possible. The Sunday afternoon traffic was light enough that she could track his silver Honda without getting too close, about 3 miles. Down Highway 95, Mr. Chandler suddenly pulled into a gas station. Marissa's heart pounded as she drove past, not daring to stop in her side mirror. She saw him get out of his car and look around the parking lot, his posture tense and watchful. She pulled into a McDonald's parking lot a 4-mile down and waited, watching the road. 5 minutes later, his Honda appeared, again continuing south. This time, she let 3 cars get between them before pulling back onto the highway. They drove for another 2 miles before Mr. Chandler made another unexpected stop, this time at a seemingly abandoned fruit stand on the side of the road. He didn't get out, just sat there for a full minute. Marissa pulled off onto a side road, partially hidden behind a cluster of pine trees, and watched him through her binoculars, a pair she'd bought for Adrian's brief interest in birdwatching. Mr. Chandler was checking his mirrors repeatedly, his head swiving left and right. He was looking for someone, looking for her. After another minute, he pulled back onto the highway. Marissa's mouth was dry as she continued following him. He turned west onto Rimrock Road, a winding 2-lane that led toward the older residential areas on the outskirts of town. She knew this area. It was where many of the original settler homes still stood, craftsman-style houses from the early 1900s, scattered among newer developments. She had to fall back further now, the lighter traffic making her car more conspicuous. The Honda disappeared. Around curves reappeared on straightaways, leading her deeper into the rural landscape. After about 4 miles, she saw his turn signal flash as he pulled into a gravel driveway. Marissa drove past, not slowing, and caught a glimpse of an old craftsman house set back from the road, partially hidden by overgrown rhododendrons. She continued for another quarter-mile before finding a place to turn round, then parked on the shoulder behind a stand of Douglas firs. Her phone still had decent signal. Out here, with trembling fingers, she searched the address she'd glimpsed on the mailbox. 4847 Rimrock Road. The county assessor's website loaded slowly, but finally the property information appeared. Owner, estate of Elalanna Chandler. Date of death November 2019. Beneficiary Tobias Chandler. Her heart was hammering now. She refined her search, finding Elalanna Chandler's obituary, a retired schoolteacher, preceded in death by her husband William, survived by her grandson Tobias. The property had been in the Chandler family since 1947. A quick search on Zillow showed more disturbing information. The house had been listed as a rental property in March 2020, just months after Elalanna's death. Charming 3-bedroom craftsman on 2 acres. Perfect for someone seeking rural tranquility, but the listing status had changed to temporarily off market on June 15, 2023. Marissa did the math quickly. Adrian had disappeared. On July 8, 2023, less than a month after Mr. Chandler had pulled his grandmother's house off the rental market, she crept back toward the property on foot, staying in the tree. From her hidden vantage point, she could see the house more clearly. It appeared well maintained, the yard mowed, the paint fresh, but newspapers were accumulated on the front porch. She could see them from here, a small pile that suggested about a week's worth, as if someone was maintaining the property but not actually living there full-time. Fresh tire tracks in the gravel driveway caught her attention, not just from Mr. Chandler's Honda, which was now parked near the detached garage. There was another set, slightly older, but still recent, leading to the back of the property. The house looked empty, despite Mr. Chandler's presence. No lights on despite the cloudy afternoon, no movement in the windows, but he'd entered with a key, confidently, like someone who came here regularly. Where was he supposed to be right now? Leading a search team through the eastern quadrant of the forest, looking for traces of her daughter. Instead, he was here, at a house he'd taken off the rental market. 3 weeks before Adrian vanished, Marissa, crouched behind a thick cluster of huckleberry bushes, her phone in her hand, Detective Holbrook's number on the screen. Her thumb hovered over the call button. What would she say that she'd followed a teacher to his grandmother's house instead of joining the search, that she had a feeling something was wrong based on some planner entries and the fact that he'd driven the opposite direction from where he was supposed to be? She could imagine the detective's response. Did you see anything criminal? Do you have evidence of a crime? And what did she have, really? A teacher at a house he legally owned concerning but vague diary entries, a bad feeling in her gut. Number. She needed more before she made that call. If she was wrong, if this was all paranoid delusion brought on by grief and the morning shock of finding Buddy alive, she'd not only embarrass herself, but potentially derail the actual search efforts. And if she was right, she couldn't risk Mr. Chandler being alerted and potentially harming Adrian. Marissa backed away from her hiding spot and made her way to her car. She drove back down Rimrock Road, looking for a better vantage point. About a quarter mile from the Chandler property, she spotted an abandoned barn, its red paint peeling and roof partially collapsed. A rutted dirt path led behind it. Perfect. She parked her Camry behind the barn, hidden from the road, and began making her way back toward the house on foot. The forest was thick here, Douglas firs and cedars creating a natural screen. She moved carefully, avoiding dry branches, grateful for the soft forest floor. Dampened by recent rain, the back of the Chandler property came into view through the trees. From this angle, she could see details she'd missed from the front. The basement level of the house was more visible here, where the ground sloped away. Most of the basement windows had been replaced with glass blocks, the thick, opaque kind that let in light but prevented anyone from seeing in or out. It was an unusual modification for a rental property, but there was one small window that hadn't been fully blocked, a ventilation window, maybe 8 in high and 2 feet wide. Still glassed, but with what looked like curtains hanging inside. Fresh concrete patches around the foundation caught her eye. Someone had done recent work here. Ceiling gaps, or perhaps reinforcing the foundation. The concrete looked maybe a few months old, its color still lighter than the original foundation. Marissa crept closer, using the overgrown rhododendrons as cover. Her heart was pounding so hard, she was sure it could be heard from the house. When she reached the ventilation window, she had to crouch low, the window being only about a foot above ground level. There was a small gap where the curtains didn't quite meet. She pressed her face close to the glass, cupping her hands around her eyes to block the afternoon light. What she saw made her blood freeze. It was unmistakably a classroom setup. A whiteboard on the far wall, covered in writing, a desk with textbooks stacked neatly on its surface, and hanging on the back of the desk chair, Adrian's purple backpack, the one with the small rip on the front pocket that she'd patched with a smiley face iron in, the one she'd taken with her on that last